Thank you, Sandy, for such an inspiring story. And kudos to ABPN for putting all this together. It's really phenomenal. And thanks for having FBN as a partner. For those of you I've not had the privilege to meet, my name is Caroline Xiao, and I helm sustainability at Family Business Network International. It's a global network of about 7,000 family business members, ranging from 2 to 14 generations, some private, some publicly listed, some SMEs, some MNCs. What we all have in common is that we aspire to create a vibrant community of family businesses and businesses that can be a model of sustainability. And we aim to do this by engaging thought leaders like yourself, progressive family businesses, and other practice leaders in an environment of shared learning to effect positive and environment social change. So we've done quite a bit over the 2 days. I mean, we've unpacked so many models, right? We've looked at, we've seen that venture philanthropy is starting to gain traction. We've seen that investments that were pure profit are sort of moving to the middle. The same can be said of the spectrum of organizations that are out there, right? Charities are beginning to look a bit like businesses, and businesses are beginning to look a bit less evil. And you know, and so many terms we've learned about impacts and assessments and measurements, but I want to quote what my friend Maurice from Y saying, so many terms, but these are all labels. After all, what's in a name? And for this session, when we talk about philanthropy, I want to use the word in its original form, which is a Greek word, which is love human being. So whether it's as an individual, whether it's by the stories that their grandmothers told them, whether it's the nonprofits that they set up or their foundations or their businesses itself, how do leading families and family businesses demonstrate this love of humanity? I know my good friend Ruth will say, but does humanity encompass the animal kingdom? But that's a separate conversation that we had yesterday. All right, so what's in a name, right? We've come across so many models already, right? Yunus gave us social business. We have McKee's model of conscious capitalism, so many. But I think 3 things that we can draw from all of this is that it's stewardship of people, planet, and profit. And on this spectrum, I always talk about whether you minimize the harm you do or you maximize the good that you do. For example, minimize harm. I exist, so I cut down my carbon footprint, I fly less, etc. But that's not enough. By your very existence on this planet, are you making it a better place? For example, we all agree that by having AVPN and then convening this group of thought and practice leaders, the world is a better place, right? So, wow, kudos to you all. And how do we create those business models that identify, blend business and social values? So that's what we mean when we talk about philanthropy and sustainability. I just like to tell this story. Some of you might have heard it. It's Million McDonough. He's on his TED Talk. He talks about walking down this street in California, and he looks into this toy shop, and he peers very closely at this rubber ducky, and then he sees that it reads, "This product contains chemicals known by the state of California to cause cancer and birth defects and other reproductive harm." And he asks, what kind of a culture are we? We make these products. We know they are toxic, they're harmful, they're poisonous, but we label them as a toy, and then we sell it to children. Good question. He thinks we have a design problem. I think we have a values problem. The work of McDonough and Brogard in Cradle to Cradle, they really despair and they deride this cradle to grave model that we're also familiar with, right? You take, you make, you destroy. And there must be a better way to make things, and that's what they're pushing business and designers to make products that replenish, restore, and regenerate the earth rather than to destroy it. They've inspired a lot of businesses. One of them is Mars, and I just want to show this chart. Mars has commissioned these triple E-class ships. Some of you may know them, which will be designed for future safe and sound recycling. I had talked about this case study for a while to my members, so it was very gratifying that on April 7th, when I got home and I read the paper, I had seen that, you know, doing this good work, this cradle-to-cradle innovation had resulted in increased business while reducing the carbon footprint. So a bold aspiration, because what Mars is trying to do is that They want to take control of the way that they make things, so eventually they're going to make new ships out of old. But, so this is, I said, a bold aspiration. It's a significant milestone, and of course, it's a checkbox for people who want to prove the business case for sustainability. We can easily prove the business case for sustainability because there are lots of good examples out there. But I think there's also a moral case. And some of you may or you may not know about this little-known study done by the university in Denmark. How many of you drive? Oh, come on. How many of you check your tires? The pressure in your tires. Why do you check the pressure in your tires? Okay, so why else? Why do you check your tires? Safety, yeah? Performance, what else? What do you save? Fuel. Okay, so they did the experiment, okay? And they say, get a free tire checkup. And it was at a petrol station. And they say, save your finances, get a free tire checkup. Another day they said, save the environment, get a free tire checkup. And you know what? Nobody responded to save your finances. Everybody who did respond got that free tire checkup because they chose to save the environment. So it's heartening for all of us to know that for many people, green is better than gold. Okay. Moving on. Many of you know this study, right? It was by a UN Global Compact and Accenture, started in 2007. Interview all these CEOs, and they said, oh, yes, we believe in sustainability. We're going to allow our core business to improve performance on social and environmental impacts. They repeat this study every 3 years. So next one was in 2010. And the whole mood was so euphoric. They said sustainable development was moving into a new era, and sustainability, which is the active management of governance, social, and environmental issues, are going to be embedded in core businesses worldwide. So everybody said, yes, we're on the right track. They repeated it again, 2013. Biggest survey ever. Over 1,000 CEOs, 103 countries, 27 industries. And you know what the CEO said? The global economy is not on track. Business is not doing enough. I think we've reached a plateau. Why? Oh, government, economy, couldn't prove the business case, caught in pilot paralysis. Many reasons. But we know there are many businesses, many organizations that have made the leap. So why are some mired in challenges, and why do some manage to build that business case? And it's about their approach. And what has been found through the studies is that majority of companies, their sustainability, or what they call sustainability, is centered on their brand, reputation, some checkbook philanthropy, risk mitigation, compliance. But for companies that really want to make a difference, for organizations that really want to make a difference, it's centered on innovation, on growth, and sourcing new sources of value. And I'm so pleased today to have 4 individuals who represent some of these leading companies that will share with us how their companies and how their foundations have managed to make a difference. Thank you. And I will start with my dear friend, Bai Ravi, who has just flown in all the way. She comes from a 4th-generation family business. And can you just tell us a little bit more about your family, about the group, and the approach your family has taken as they've charted both their philanthropy and sustainability journeys?
Thanks, Carolyn. Well, right now, since we've successfully in the process of packing up the longest-running family in business of politics in our country, I'm not quite sure using the word families in societal role right now is kind of in vogue in the country, but nevertheless. I want to start with a little story that will sort of outline what you want me to highlight. And when I was back from the United States, about a decade ago, running my own enterprise, hadn't joined the family business yet. I was in the process of closing down my company because nobody would come and work for a young woman. And I was sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m. in the morning, mulling about how the hell I was going to really close the shop in the next 3 months. And my dad sort of, wandered in and said, oh, what's up, this is kind of strange. You're not working in the night, you're just sitting. Is everything all right? And I said, well, I think I'm going to shut the business, because nobody's wanting to come and work for a 21-year-old. And, how the hell do you run a business without a team? So he looked at me and he said, so how many people work for your, he said your garage shop, I think I remember. And I said, well, about 52. He said, I want you to know one thing. One person's livelihood in India supports 4 people's lives. So you have 52 people who are working for you today. You multiply that by 4. So whatever decision you make tonight, it's absolutely fine. It's going to impact at least 100 plus lives. I was like, yeah, right. You're making it easy, buddy. Thank you. And then he goes on to make life worse. And he said, not to mention all the vendors who serve you and your customers and their customers. And, of course, the family name, I'm just throwing in the top. And I think in that one sentence, it sort of, described to me what is the role of businesses with society. And how every employee was family, but even his or her family was also your family. And it sort of expanded my view about what a family business meant and what a business that becomes a family eventually, because the way you look at it and how you really look at your role as a business in society. We're a 120-year-old group. My great-grandfather started in 1896. I'm the first woman to get into the family business. And I remember, my dad sort of making it very, very clear that, listen here, you go work somewhere first, let me see if somebody gives you a job. Then when I got done with that, he said, well, go start your own business, let's see if it becomes successful. We don't want failed CEOs coming and helping us in business here. And, then I appeared, and, in 2005, I joined the family business. And when I joined the family business, one of the things that I sort of was looking at was, where were we really looking at our social roles and our corporate social responsibility, as well as the huge family philanthropy that we do, because my great-grandfather wrote a family constitution that 10% of our top earnings must go into philanthropy. And that every family member after the age of 25 must also give time in addition to their own share of contribution that is sort of taken away involuntarily from your family income, by the way. Therefore, there was a huge question because we ran large philanthropic institutions, which were family-driven, family passion-oriented. And the business also, about 32,000 employees, was having its own CSR efforts. And, there was this mismatch of what's going on. And clearly, we were looking for a road ahead. And what you do normally when you get lost is you call consultants. And you say, show us the way. And so we sat through a series of presentations by many, many people. And I still remember we had somebody who came in and talked from Ashoka, explaining to my father about what was social enterprise about. And my dad looked at him and said, so what do you mean by social entrepreneur? Does the guy make money? And he sort of looked around back and, sort of told the Ashoka team that I believe that every enterprise has to be in the business of creating social capital. And I don't think they're de-linked at all under any circumstances. And from that thread came the process of really devising a strategy of separating the family corporate social responsibility parts into 2 different halves. So the family then decided to continue its own philanthropic process, whether it was through venture philanthropy, impact investments, social enterprise investments, not-for-profit incubators, and a series of activities. And the business decided to continue its corporate social responsibility activities, which were in the line with business, in the sense we wanted every employee in the business to have an opportunity to be part of the social impact that the business was created. And I think I'm going to leave it at that, Carolyn, because I think you wanted me to sort of talk about what business we were in and where we were. And being in the business we are, which is into supply chain and logistics, we have the opportunity, A, of the geographical spread, but we also have the opportunity of working with some really absolutely bottom of the pyramid workers, as well as some very, very high-end workers. And it gives us the breadth to really work on both the economic as well as social landscape. So that's where we are right now, and I think I'm going to share later on what we do with it.
Thank you so much. Hyung-san, would you like to share a little bit about your family business? You hail from one of the most well-known family businesses in the region. It's gone from auto repair to construction to shipbuilding to motors. Tell us a bit about the philanthropy and the social causes that your family has supported and what led you to start Root Impact.
Thank you, Carolyn. So it is my grandfather who started all this family business, which pronounced like Sunday, but not Sunday. So when he started all this, it was just before the Korean War. We were still under the Japanese colonization, and then at that time, he used to be clerk at the grocery store. He used to deliver the rice, and then after that, he started his auto repair store for the U.S. Army, and then after that, it became construction company, and he started automobile company, and then after that, somehow he changed into shipbuilding company, and then department store, and then literally everything. And my father currently owns insurance company. But the really fascinating fact is that my grandfather, for him, I think it is similar with all the other big company founder at the time, is that he really wanted to contribute to the country and the people. He really wanted the people to prosper by what he's doing. He always says that he's mere labor worker who's just become very fortunate. So he always wanted to give back to the country. Like, for example, he started his own foundation now is 34 years ago, which is one of the first big foundation in Korea. Their main purpose was to provide medical care to the rural areas. Now it became one of the largest hospital in Korea. And also, he literally built Korea not by himself, but through his company, because when you go to Seoul, you can see the bridges that is built by his company. You can see the buildings, apartment built by him, department store built by him, and the road built by him, the highway built by him, literally, I mean, everything. So, so it is quite overwhelming for his family to, basically, sometimes it's suffocating by just looking up what he's doing, but still, I really was heavily influenced by his noble will to somehow, you really have to contribute to people to be better. So, but sadly, after that, in Korea, after he passed away, Korea suffered this business economic like situation like IMF. So second generation of our family, their main concept was survival. So they really didn't have the luxury of thinking about giving back. They just have to take care of their company. And then during this time, even though we survived this IMF and we become really good in terms of economy, but we had our own negative side effect, I think. So Korea, we have #1 suicide rate, much more higher than second country. And then a lot of the students, we are suffering from this suffocating education. They go to like schools and after school for 18 hours every day, and then they spend this kind of life for 12 years. And then they enter the university, and then they spend another 6 years to become a part of the big conglomerates, and then they spend 30 years to pay their children's education costs and marriage costs. So it's very, very sad life, and I know that. I mean, I went to the public school, and then I met a lot of friends who are suffering this kind of thing, and then I know that even though I really admire what my grandfather did or other big company did, but we are somehow responsible for this. And right now, like Samsung and Hyundai, which is pronounced like Sunday, and LG or SK, this like 4 or 5 major conglomerates in Korea, they are like represent 50% of all economy. I mean, like Samsung and Hyundai, their revenue is similar with the government annual budget. So which means few families really are heavily responsible for all entire country. So I guess that's why I started my own non-profit organization to persuade my family that it is really our responsibility. And then this having a feeling responsible and engaging heavily in either philanthropy or social enterprises or like CSV, creating shared value, to actively participating in solving problems is our families being sustainable. So I guess that's why I started my own non-profit organization, Root Impact, and then I'll briefly introduce my HGI later.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like Singapore, yeah, the education system. Okay, Victoria, could you, she represents probably the longest lived family business, 37 generations. Yeah, so, so tell us what inspired the royal family, or more specifically, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and Prince Harry to embark on this new venture.
So I think, as many of you will know, the British royal family's supported all kinds of philanthropy for many years. But I think the interesting thing about the Royal Foundation is that it is an example of a new generation wanting to do things in their own way, and that's one of the big themes I think that's come out of the last couple of days, is that philanthropy is an intensely personal thing. Whether you're a social investor or whether you're a pure philanthropist from a grant-making perspective, I think it has to be based on your own passions. And so the Royal Foundation was created really to enable our three patrons to find their own way in philanthropy and to invest in the things that they felt most passionate about. And so we work in three areas. We work in conservation and sustainable development, and that's more global, disadvantaged young people in the UK, and military veterans and their families. And those are three quite specific areas. They're not a permanent limit, but they're the three things which at the moment we think we've bitten off as much as we can chew. And I think we wanted to, certainly our three patrons have wanted to make a real impact on those three areas before moving forward. And I think the question of impact is really important again for this generation, that it isn't enough just to give, and it isn't enough just to be seen to be giving. They want to be seen to be having an impact, seen to be, for their own purposes, measuring what they do, understanding whether or not they're succeeding, understanding how to move on if they're not succeeding and try a different way, and to understand how to scale ideas that do have impact. And I think those things are all, very much things which are at the heart of what we are trying to do with the foundation, which is to pick some quite specific things where we think we can have an impact, to try lots of different ways, talk to lots of different people. We do a lot of convening. Almost everything we do in partnership with others, because we think that's probably the best way of achieving impact. And we're just embarking on a kind of major measurement scheme, which is partly exciting and partly terrifying. So I think that I think we'll go on to talk a little bit more about one of the examples later on. But like many things I've heard today, the Royal Foundation is an example of long, long years of family tradition, but interpreted in its own way for this generation.
Thank you, Victoria. And Keith, share with us your family and your experience in philanthropy and some of the initiatives that you have pioneered in Singapore and the region. Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. Well, as I share my story, I think some of you, particularly those who are the professional practitioners, may probably find that my family model of philanthropy may seem to you a rather messy model. But then as I share with you how all this came about, then you might be able to understand and probably sympathize with the messy model that I have. But I would like to say that this somewhat messy model does seem to lend me a great amount of flexibility in this whole area of philanthropy. If you talk about family, you talk about business, you talk about philanthropy, I guess there's probably two aspects that will come to mind. And one would be genes, the genes that are, I guess, passed on from generation to generation. And then the other one would be money, which would be a necessary part of being able to help to make a difference. So I go back, if I talk about genes, well, firstly I'd like to just mention my grandmother's grandfather. I don't know what other term to call that. Maybe it's great-great-great-grandfather. Well, anyway. Well, he was a well-known philanthropist in the 19th century here in Singapore. Unfortunately, he only left me his genes. But maybe if one day I needed to get some health services, I might be able to go to the counter of that hospital and say, hey, this is my great-great-grandfather's hospital, help me, something like that. The other person I'd like to mention is my grandfather's mother. So my grandmother, on her side, there was a lineage of philanthropy in the family. And on my grandfather's side, his mother, she was also a well-known philanthropist of her time. In her case, though, while she left me with some genes, she also left me with some of the money. So that became helpful. And today I help to oversee the charitable trust that remains as a legacy in our family. But as I began to oversee this charitable trust, I also wanted to know a little bit about her. Now, I did know her for 25 years of my life. I was 25 years old when she passed away. And the last 10 years of her life, I did get very fond of her, and I think she did like me a little bit. So, but my memories of her, probably in my childhood, go back to a lady that was, you know, pretty intimidating, pretty strict, and I guess partly because of the gap, the generational gap, that could be part of the reason. But when I began to research what she did, and some of this is captured in publications, then I find that, you know, what we're talking about, innovation in philanthropy today, may not be as innovative as we think it is. For example, it's recorded in a book that about 100 years ago, she formed a giving circle. And she formed a giving circle of ladies, and they all came together and pooled their money and donated this to the, and bought an airplane for the British war effort in the First World War. So giving circle was, you know, was what she was, in a sense, embarking on in that time. But I did wonder, you know, when there's all these ladies getting together, putting all their money together, and these were all probably wives of fairly well-to-do men, and so maybe the idea was it might be better to go into philanthropy instead of philandering. So it would take the money away and get it there. So, but anyway, other things that she did at that time, 100 years ago in Singapore, infant mortality, child mortality was very high, and she funded efforts to improve the training of midwives, particularly midwives who were helping with the immigrant community, the Chinese immigrant community that was coming in. They were not well looked after in Singapore, and so she was funding training so that the midwives and the whole health standards in that area would improve. I find myself 100 years later supporting an effort also to help through this same foundation, the same charity trust, helping to improve infant mortality rates in Cambodia. We were there a few months ago to help in an effort. So here she was addressing things like that, which are still issues that we face in our community, in our society, in our countries in Asia today. And the other area that she was particularly strong on was education. Education particularly for girls. So she was involved in the setting up of schools, and one school in particular, a key girls' school in Singapore. We're going to be supporting some of their extension efforts as well. So all this has helped to shape some of my own philanthropic perspectives and focus. And I do hope that, you know, as long as in my generation we don't mess up what we have here entrusted with us, we'll be able to pass this on to future generations. But I'd like to also add that for me personally, with regards to my journey in philanthropy, a key part of it is driven by spiritual conviction. And I think yesterday a keynote speaker did mention about some of the teachings that one learns through the different religions. And I suppose the key aspects of love, compassion, generosity, helping others, essentially do form basis, a key part in one's response, I guess, to philanthropy. So that's on the family side. I'll just touch a little bit about business side before I hand the time back to then. On the business side, after graduating, I found myself faced with this key, I guess one of the key issues of family businesses is it doesn't pass down generally beyond the third generation. And so with that, I had the opportunity then to start businesses on a clean sheet, essentially. And since my time is up, I'll just leave it that on the business side, I've been able to build that as a kind of a first generation, even though with third generation money, been able to build that and develop and input philanthropic aspects into it.
Thank you.
So pass back
Thanks.
to you.
And it's good to know that genes are more important than money, right? Okay, Victoria had shared with us, some of the work of the Royal Foundation, and I particularly found that the work they're doing on conservation and wildlife was something that's, we can learn a lot from them, but given the time constraint, I asked her to share about that model in particular, because it really talks about collaboration across stakeholders and a multi-sectoral approach. So, thanks, Victoria.
Thank you. So when we first started thinking about how the Royal Foundation could use could operate philanthropically, of course, the obvious thing is to think about it quite simply and sort of say, well, we've got 3 of the most famous people in the world on our books, so we'll use that.
Who are they? Do you all know? Yeah, assumptions. Yeah.
But we wanted to take a slightly more thoughtful approach than that. And so we tried to think a bit more broadly about what our assets are and what our assets within the organization. So we have capital, but we don't have a huge amount of capital. And so we really wanted to think of it as seed capital. So we felt we could have much more impact if we seeded things at an early stage rather than making what would be a relatively small contribution to a much bigger pot. The second asset we have, obviously, is in terms of being able to raise public awareness, so we can shine a spotlight, raise public awareness about particular issues. But actually, our third asset, and probably our most important asset, and our most valuable asset, is our ability to convene. Not many people refuse an invitation. And that can lead all kinds of people who would never have considered sitting in a room together or working together to have a slightly different approach to whether or not they may want to work together. So when we started thinking about what we could do on conservation, and we really looked at those 3 different assets as a kind of Venn diagram, if you like. So we try and find things that sit right in the sweet spot in the middle of those 3 things. With wildlife and conservation, we felt that the biggest contribution we could make was to try and get what is an enormous field of organizations with some of the biggest sort of charitable brands in the world, try and get them to work together, try and get them to pool their assets in particular areas and think about how single messages and single campaigns could be more effective if you can leverage the footprint of global conservation organizations. So we invited 7 of the world's biggest generic conservation organizations to a meeting at St. James's Palace, and they all came. And everyone said to us, they'll come, but they'll never work together. And actually, that's really not been true. What's been really interesting is that almost we've created an excuse, just the right excuse, for them to work together. And we haven't asked them to merge. We haven't asked them to give up their brands. We haven't asked them to give up their fundraising departments or their communications departments or any of those things. And we haven't asked them to stop doing anything that they're doing on the ground. What we've asked them to do is to work together where there is what we would call a conservation crisis. So we've said, if there's something that we all think is really, really concerning and worrying, is it something we can all do together and leverage our global footprint and assets and resources? And then the other thing that was very interesting is that when we started to look at those organizations, one of the things that was very obvious was that they weren't really communicating very well with the younger generation, so the sort of 15 to 30-year-olds. And so that is something that we agreed we would do together. And for the time being, that's where we've left it. So we created a kind of brand, if you like, called United for Wildlife. And the Duke is the president of United for Wildlife, and the heads of the other 7 organizations sit around a table together on a regular basis and decide how they're going to go forward. And we'll focus on 2 things: the engagement of 15 to 30-year-olds in conservation, because if we don't engage that generation, we're not going to get anywhere, and on the international and illegal wildlife trade, which is currently decimating some of the most iconic species on our planet. And if we don't do something about that pretty quick, they won't be there for that next generation. And that generation probably won't forgive this generation for not doing something about it. So that's, I guess, just an example of how we've tried to use our different assets rather than looking at a more traditional form of philanthropy.
And they're now talking to each other when they sit around the table?
Yeah. They all
Pretty
quite
good.
like each other. I think that they couldn't really, I'm not sure that they wanted to admit that beforehand, but actually they all get on pretty well.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Keith, perhaps you can continue your story about the business. And I know you pioneered ASAP with NUS, and I did see my dear friend Swisam. Is she here? She's still here? Swisam, is she from NUS, ASAP? Oh, okay. She was here. Yeah, maybe
I'll say hello to her by next year.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, but maybe I just add briefly on the story of ASAP from my perspective. I think it was in 2006, and all of a sudden I get this invitation from the business school, the NUS Business School. I was a graduate from there many years ago, and the invitation was, would you speak at the commencement ceremony for that year? And I thought, now, did somebody cancel out? Or what's happening? Anyway, I thought it might be a good opportunity to just engage with my old school. And at the ceremony, I had a chance to talk to the dean. And I was just in this current chapter of philanthropy, and I asked the dean, I said, have you thought about having having philanthropy as a discipline in the school? Now, this is the same time when Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, there was a lot of publicity on, I suppose, in the business world, engaging in a significant way in philanthropy. So the dean said, yeah, we did think about it, but we haven't really moved very far. I said, well, if you are keen to get this developed, I'm quite open to discussing how we can collaborate on this. And a couple of years later, the school came back and said, we've got some proposals, can we talk about it? So from there, it was agreed that we would undertake to fund the starting out of this center. And we called it initially the Center for Social Entrepreneurship and Philanthropy at the NUS Business School. I was particularly keen, as I mentioned earlier on, about the history in my family, and I was also particularly keen because Singapore, I believe, is moving into this new chapter of philanthropy, and there's a lot that can really be harnessed here in Singapore. So ASAP has been around for a number of years, and our focus, we've come up with a number of papers. One will be launched tomorrow. The hope of the center is that it will play a role in supporting the philanthropic development, certainly in Singapore, but we've added Asia a couple of years ago, and we hope that will also be able to play a role in that. But out of ASAP, I just want to talk a little bit about social entrepreneurship. Some of it was mentioned by our keynote speaker earlier on, and I, together with a few other colleagues, we set up a venture philanthropy initiative a few years back, and part of that was to engage with social entrepreneurs to be able to help them build capacity, to understand the initiatives they were running, to provide some funding, but really to be more engaging and to help to build capacity. And then I've also, in recent years, been involved with the Singapore International Foundation Young Social Entrepreneurs Program. So with that, there's been quite a bit of engagement with social entrepreneurs. Yesterday, Mr. Chu mentioned about the wonderful funding that we get from our Singapore government. Now, I fully endorse that. That takes care of a lot of funding required for charities, education, and so on. But it doesn't really take care of the social entrepreneurs mainly because social entrepreneurs, young startups, They're not what we call in Singapore IPCs. They don't have the benefit of that. So raising money, raising funds for social entrepreneurs, I think not just in Singapore, but probably generally Asia-wide from what we've heard, is a continuing challenge. And I just want to make a plea to foundations, individuals, high net worth individuals and all that. Can we help to find better ways to fund social entrepreneurs? We're all saying that social entrepreneurs are the answer to our issues and problems of tomorrow. But how can we do that if we don't provide them with the resources and support? And so it's a plea I'd like to make to all of you. Can we find ways, we make them, we put them through presentations, we make them jump through hoops and everything else, and give them $5,000 at the end of the day. We've got to do much more than that.
Rallying call from Keith for social entrepreneurs. Thank you. Maybe you can start something like that in Korea too, a center for social entrepreneurship and philanthropy. Less stressful for the students. Yeah. And Kyung-sun shared with me one of his programs, the Holistic Growth Initiative, and I thought it would be quite interesting for us to hear about that. Yeah.
Actually, we have MBA for social entrepreneurship in Korea, thanks to the Escape Happiness Foundation there.
Oh,
Yes.
wonderful, yes.
To introduce about this whole holistic growth initiative, so my personal vision is very simple. I really want to contribute to this happy society where everyone can respect each other. So in order to do this, I followed, I think it's Ashoka's vision and mission. If you have social entrepreneurs who can resonate with this value, you can not only solve the social problems, but also you can inspire other people to be like this, to follow this movement of change makers. So that's why we are focusing on these individuals who could create a lot of social innovation in society, either social entrepreneurs or the nonprofit professionals. So that's why my own nonprofit organization, we are supporting this individual, and we help them to success in their area. So we provide them with the education programs, and also we provide them with the community. And this stage, I realized that maybe we can create something bigger. Maybe we can do something meaningful experiment that can show to other society or more public, more major stakeholders like my family to think about these kind of things. So this is the reason why I came up with this idea. So basically, this is the town, and this is impact cluster where the social innovation happen. So it will be like this. We are providing co-housing to 200 and more than 200 people. They're gonna be social entrepreneurs, artists, chef, or other like SME owners, these kind of people. And then we are investing in SMEs and social enterprises that's providing affordable education and accessible art, and who provide local healthy foods to the community people, and who can provide community service to the people. And then we are mixing this with the real estate development. Like I mentioned before, our family owns the construction company, which is similar with real estate development in Korea. So we wanted to prove them just demolishing and build new fancy tower is not appropriate enough, not enough right now. So we have to look for this alternative plan for sustainable urban life. So from my family's philanthropic money and individual investment, and then we created some sort of alliance with this other landlords and social entrepreneurs, nonprofit people, and then we are making this town, which will be very highly visible because you can actually see what's going on. Sorry, sometimes my vocabulary is not working. So this is building. So it's very easy to see, easy to understand. If you came here, you can see people happily collaborate with other social entrepreneurs who's solving social problems, who's providing education to the local students and everything. So by doing this, if this experiment is successful, I'll be more than happy to show this to my family, and then this $100 billion company, maybe they can start a little bit of here and there. They can do sustainable urban development here and there, and then that is my goal. And there are some people from Korea right now, please don't tell my family. They don't know about this yet. I will tell this. I will tell this after this experiment becomes successful.
The privileges of being at an AVPN event.
So I really wish this could work because this is not only in philanthropy area. This is partnership with philanthropy, non-profit, business area, and then we have to work with government official too. So the root impact will be more than happy to be an intermediary or even flying monkey to the people. So as long as they have, so we will convene their ideas and then we will make sure to have those kind of ideas happen. So I'll be more than happy to share this. Most of the construction or most of the, how should I say, venue will be open this year. So I'll be more than happy to share this progress next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. And by Ravi, I mean, in my work with family business, I recognize that a lot of them have this long-term outlook because of perhaps of their intrinsic intergenerational nature. And I know that SCA has done a lot in terms of incorporating sustainability into their core business. And I was wondering if you could share with the audience some of the work that SCA has done in this space.
So I think where I left off last time, we were at this juncture in the family on how do we really separate the family philanthropy from the corporate social responsibility that the businesses did. We have about 16 companies that operate in 17,000 locations across India. So you've got a very wide footprint and you really have a vast scale of implementation. And we'd been in philanthropy also for a very, very long time. So the first thing first, before we separated, we wanted to know what were the common things between philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, and I mean in between philanthropy and business. And we realized that between an entrepreneur and a philanthropist, there are the 5 common values. One is the value of passion and vision. The second is the value of risk-taking. The third is the value of persistence. The fourth is the value of really, in terms of constantly re-energizing yourself and learning. And clearly, the fifth is the value of, looking at very long horizons for implementation. And we realized that these were the common values between an entrepreneur and a philanthropist. And therefore, it was very easy for us to take entrepreneurial approach to our philanthropy and philanthropic approach to our enterprises. And that's how we began, really looking at some of the initiatives in the business that we have now very deep-seated work in, and also in our philanthropy. And before I get into the business, Caroline, so our philanthropy is a very exhaustive process, and I wanted me to talk about it earlier, which is that it's a very deep work. There is a family process. You actually sort of present your ideas. You actually have to pitch like you've been doing. There's a pitching for the idea. And there are external people involved. And it's a very, very long, exhaustive process of even really using your own personal family money for your philanthropy. And you have to give a lot of time. So to give you an example, for my own philanthropies of really creating micro entrepreneurial ecosystems across India, I traveled for last 51 days, when you call me Caroline, driving across India 18,000 kilometers, right, on the road. And that's the kind of time that you're expected to put in if you really want your philanthropy to be supported by the Family Philanthropy Fund. And when you look at the business side of it, I think the example you wanted me to share was when you build large infrastructure, which we have to in our business and logistics, we build ports, we build airports, we build large container stations, you have to acquire land. And acquire land in a country which is almost 80% agrarian. And therefore, land holdings are small. You're going to always acquire land from village communities. And therefore, you have to realize that it's only when you bring your philanthropic approach to enterprise that you realize that there is a socioeconomic imbalance you're about to create. It may be just a business deal. You're just going to buy a piece of land, but you are introducing a socioeconomic imbalance. There's an agriculture way of life that has been going on in that area for some time. You're going to come in and set up a commercial enterprise, and you aren't really thinking about creating alternative livelihood for the community, right? Because you're just going to get a whole bunch of other people to come and work there. Now think about it, you're running this fancy facility across the road, this guy's on the other side, he's still in his village, he's basically sold his land, and just like how we value things that our grandmothers and grandfathers have given, or what has happened from generation to generation, you also have to realize that the poor only have their land, we may be given wealth, we may be given credibility and name and everything, and we hold on to it so dearly, because it's not just from a financial perspective, but it's also an emotional thing. So when you do acquire land from poor people who have to sell it, it's generally a financial decision they have made, but it's also an emotional, tearing apart that they've done because the land has been passed on from generation to generation. And when we brought that understanding in the way we wanted to really run our facilities in those areas, we came up with the idea of going to the villages from where we were acquiring the land for our infrastructure. And in India, you because of the kind of land acquisitions that have been happening over the years, there has been this process of politicking where the local villagers will take help from the local politician and say, well, you at least have to give 10 jobs to 10 people from the village in your enterprise. And it's a very political affair. Labor unions get involved. So we went in and talked to the bunch of villagers. This is for our warehousing business. And we said, well, it's going to take us 6 to 8 months to construct one facility. And we were very happy. We don't want to hire. So the villagers said, well, you'll have to assure us 10 jobs. So I looked at them and I said, no, I want all 100, 200, or 1,000 based on the size of the business. In that point in time, it was about 450. And I said, I want all 450 people to come from this village. Do you have 450 people who can work? And he looked at me and said, we don't. And I'm going to have to go to 10 other villages and get people. And we taught them how to set up companies. We trained them in accounting. We created micro-enterprises. We trained them in warehousing and, post-production kind of logistics activities, certified them, and this training wasn't really done by just anybody. We actually got in people from British Technical Education Certificate System, BTEC, to come down and do training for these people. Some of the incomes went on from 2,000 rupees a month to almost 11,000 rupees a month, which means the second child can go to school. Women started working in the village. We, of course, had a dedicated labor base. We didn't have to, we saved all the money you save in terms of giving transportation conveyance to the staff. We didn't have to build extra labor, for extra shifts because the village was always available and across the road. The emotional ties we built with the village was very, very deep. And today, there are 15 such companies in the 210 village clusters in that area that operates, where they not only serve us, they serve other businesses, and you really taught somebody how to fish, right? And you've also benefited significantly while doing that. You have trained manpower, you have loyal, committed manpower, and I know we had one political situation where there was a political party holding a demonstration who wanted us to keep our facility shut on a particular day. And they were going to throw stones at the facility, and almost 150 villagers stood like a human wall and said, you'd have to go through us to really harm this facility. And I think what we've therefore learned through that process is that there is no way you can create long-lasting financial capital unless and until you focus on creating deep and sustained social capital. So that's been our learning.
Thank you. And that's a lovely example about earning the social license to operate, and that happens only through time, and through generations is even more powerful. And now I'd like to turn it over to the floor. Do you all have any questions for our panelists? Please raise your hands. All questions are welcome except questions on the royal family, perhaps. And please introduce yourself so that we can better appreciate the diversity and talent in the room. Any questions? I know it's a long day. Or have the panelists been so coherent, so articulate, and so clear you have no questions at all? Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Hilary Liu from Taiwan, and currently I'm working at Big Four, even though I'm now taking annual leave to do volunteering thing for social enterprise community, like helping Michael Norton here. And I was really, really exciting to hear all this and the 2 days. And thank you all that I'm still really emotional now by looking at all these great case studies and also this thing right in front of me that because we are also helping the second or third generation from the big family listed companies, so I do have some experience how these people are thinking and then how they can make some contribution to the society. So for example, for this great project that I could see that in Taiwan also we have quite similar thing is happening now. And even though a lot of people, they don't understand what is social enterprise, so I am happy to share with them that what I've been learning in University of Cambridge to do social enterprise management. So at that time that I was sharing this idea with them, and they say, okay, it sounds good, but I don't know how to do it, so can you help us? So now we do have the ability to help listed company or the families or SMEs to get together to do the collaborative work together. So I'm wondering that whether when you're opening this and you'll be some opportunity for us to link you together with the social enterprises in Taiwan. Also, many other friends sitting here also, some they couldn't come and maybe they'll come next year. Okay. And they would do, because they also have the arts people and they are focusing on the lost traditions and, sorry, still quite emotional. And for the FMBs that they train the disabled or the disadvantaged groups to have the great skills so that they can win the world champion break, something like that in the world. And also they have the craft shop that they would use the wasted coffee beans to make the fashion t-shirt. Yeah. And then I find it was really good because it was absorb all the sweat and the stinky, smelly thing. So.
And what would you like him to do for you?
I'm just asking that whether it's possible to work with local Taiwanese and to do the quite similar thing, and then maybe we could do the swap, like when they're staying inside, and then they could come over to Taiwan to exchange it, just like exchange programs, like what I offered to 15 the restaurant in London when I was studying there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for having great interest in my project. I mean, I thought I was the crazy one in Korean, but I'm glad that I wasn't that crazy right now. So this whole project is in very early stages. We are basically like huge blank pages, and then we have to draw this bite together. So we'll be more than happy to learn from your experience, and is there any way to collaborate with you? I'll be more than happy to talk with you later. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chu.
Hi, thank you. Casey Chu, Substation, Singapore. My question to the panel is, you all have your own foundations and the philanthropic and the social enterprise work that you do. And I know you'll be polite, but to what extent is attending conferences like this helpful? What do you get from attending conferences like this?
Thank you, Casey.
Actually, I'm going to answer that, and probably Victoria will also agree. I mean, obviously we're not royal, but being in a family that has been socially very visible is like being a fish in an aquarium. Everybody wants to look at you, tuk tuk, hello, how are you? Oh, look, you're looking gold today, you're looking silver tomorrow. You're always in the spotlight. And very rarely you get chance to sit down, share, be one with people, learn from each other. So it's just always so wonderful to come and spend time at these conferences because we learn so much from you guys as well. Really.
Do any of you have any comments to make? All right, so with that, because I know time is up, we'll just a big round of applause to our panelists. They're change makers, and they've done a fantastic job. Thank you.